Welcome to the Worldwide Doula podcast. I'm Barry, I'm a registered nurse and birth doula, and each week I'm joined by a new guest speaker to talk about all things pregnancy, birth, babies, and parenthood. So it's time to sit back and relax as we get into some juicy topics. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Worldwide Doula podcast. Today I'm joined by Shelly Mackenzie. Shelley is a naturopath and nutritionist specializing in women's nutrition and women's health. Today she is coming back on the podcast to let me pick her brain about what we should be eating during each stage of your cycle to make you feel the best. Welcome back to the podcast, Shelley. How are you going?
Thanks, Barry. So good to be back. I'm excited to jump into this. As I was saying offline, it's not a topic that is covered in schools for some reason. And a lot of women don't really understand, even, not only teenagers, but women in their 30s and 40s have never really understood their periods. I'm excited that this resource will be out there and women can start to really tune into their menstrual cycle and what they should be doing or could be doing around that period.
Yes, definitely. I wish I learned more about my period in school. And my little cousins now that are starting to get their periods, they asked them, what episode do you want to hear about? They said, tell me what I should be eating during my period, because some days I just feel like shit, for lack of a better word. And other days I feel amazing. I feel good. And, as you do, we've all experienced that. But yeah, I've been in conversation with the local school where I live about giving like a hormonal health sex ed class to the locals here, just so that the teenagers that are leaving school, they can understand what's going on with their hormones, what's going on at each stage. And so when it comes time, they can fall pregnant or just understand what's going on, because our bodies are so complex. Man, I'm so excited to get into this one. It's going to be a good one.
Seriously. And, that's the thing. Like, it's sometimes I feel like there can be, and I'm so happy to hear your little cousins are like, I want to know more about my period. Because honestly, when I was a teenager, it wasn't something that was talked about, as I mentioned. And so I knew nothing about it. And I didn't really want to know anything more about it either.
Yeah.
And I see that often with our generation. I see lots of clients, for example, women in their late 20s, 30s, even their 40s, but one of their biggest barriers to trying to conceive is actually not knowing when they're ovulating, which is not their fault by any means. It's just something that was never taught to us. So this information definitely needs to get out there, because without knowing that information, you either can't prevent or try to get pregnant. And it's not their fault. Like, they've never been taught this information.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to start by telling us an overview of the different stages of the menstrual cycle, just so we can get an idea of what we're talking about?
For sure. So the first stage is, or I guess the first half of the period, is called the follicular phase. So this starts on day 1 of your menstrual bleed and lasts till around day 13 or 14. So it ends in ovulation. So when I talk about day 13 or 14, this is going to be based on a 28-day cycle, which obviously not everyone will have. So if you're experiencing a 30-day cycle, for example, you potentially might ovulate a little bit later around that day 16 or 17. It's going to be really different. And I will just say there, with ovulation, if you are tracking on an app, if you've got, say, a little flower or a little love heart or whatever it is that pops up in the middle of your cycle, for some women that's accurate, but that's based on general population. So again, it's based on, let's say, the perfect cycle. But as we discuss, and dive into this, we'll go into like the mucus changes and things like that. So you can really start to understand when you are ovulating. I always say use your app as a guide, but really try to tune into your body at that time. So yeah, the follicular phase encompasses the menstruation, which is every month. Your body prepares for pregnancy. If no pregnancy has occurred, the uterus or the womb sheds its lining, and then the menstrual blood is partially blood and partially tissue from inside the uterus. And then, this phase stops, as I said, the follicular phase at ovulation. And then ovulation is when a mature egg is released from an ovary and moves along the fallopian tube towards your uterus. This usually happens once each month, about 2 weeks before your next period. and ovulation can last 16 to 32 hours. And the luteal phase is the second half of your menstrual cycle. It begins around day 15 of a 28-day cycle and ends when you get your next period. And basically, this phase is your body either preparing for pregnancy or menstruation based on whether fertilization and implantation has occurred. So essentially, you've got the two phases, the follicular, which also encompasses the menstruation, and the luteal phase, which encompasses as well the ovulation.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Honestly, we are so complicated. So why is it important to change what you're eating depending on which cycle, what what phase of your menstrual cycle that you're in?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we are very hormonal and our hormones are shifting and changing at different times of the month. In order to create that hormonal balance, our food does play a large part of that. But with changing how we eat, we can also reduce PMS symptoms, for example. We can improve our energy needs. We can support our digestive health at certain times of the month. So not only are we looking to create that hormonal balance for our general well-being, but by doing that we then start to relieve or alleviate any symptoms that you also may experience with your period.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I have recently gone and tried to sort out my hormonal imbalance. I went to go and see an acupuncturist and a nutritionist. She's actually absolutely wonderful. I've also done an episode with her about this. And food makes such a difference. And I didn't even realize, like, she just said, basically, I have to go on a keto diet to try and level out my estrogen. I didn't even know that your estrogen is so closely related to blood sugar levels, which then affects your skin, and also it affects your testosterone and stuff like that. I don't really know the ins and out of it, but it's more complicated than you think, and it's more related than you think. It's crazy. So do you want to go a little bit deeper into what the follicular phase is and what changes occur in your body?
Yeah, for sure. So, as I mentioned, the follicular phase starts with menstruation, which typically lasts about 3 to 7 days, and the uterine lining sheds and bleeding occurs as a result of decreased levels of estrogen and progesterone. As menstruation ends, the pituitary gland in the brain starts producing a hormone shortened to FSH, the follicular stimulating hormone. FSH stimulates the growth and development of follicles, so essentially like fluid filled sacs in the ovary,
Mm.
each containing an immature egg. Typically, several follicles begin to develop, but usually only one will become dominant and continue maturing. And as the folliculars grow, they produce an increasing amount of estrogen. So, estrogen helps to thicken the endometrial lining of the uterus in preparation for potential pregnancy. It also contributes to more cervical mucus, making it an environment for sperm to survive. And during this time, and under the influence of estrogen, cervical mucus becomes like thin and slippery and I guess more alkaline. So that's kind of like women will experience cervical mucus all month round. So sometimes trying to pinpoint their ovulation mucus can be a little bit of a challenge, but we will get there. So, yeah, during this time, your cervical mucus is thin, slippery, and more alkaline, which facilitates the sperm transport through the cervix and into the uterus. And throughout the follicular phase, the endometrial lining of the uterus regenerates and thickens because of that increase in estrogen again. So, preparing for potential implantation of a fertilized egg. So, because of the increase in estrogen during this time, most women feel sexy, they have increased libido, they have increased energy levels, and this is generally where they're feeling like their best. So, if we think about it from a lifestyle perspective, your follicular phase is really that time, particularly once you kind of get out of your main bleed days. But your follicular phase is really that time of the month where you set all your meetings, you do your higher intensity activities, you set a lot of your social engagements for this time of the month because it's when you will feel your best once you get through those first initial bleed days. So, yeah, that's kind of the
Mm.
follicular phase, just to give you a bit of an overview on what's actually happening.
I mean, what you said about I kind of wanted to say it before, but what you were saying about your cycle and how it's just a guide and whether you're tracking with an app, I feel like when you're tracking with an app, the most accurate is watching what your mucus is doing to try and get an idea of where you are in your cycle. And that's how most people tell when they're ovulating and stuff like that. But again, it's just a guide. And I feel like with the Flow app, for instance, it has quite a few different options to choose from for your mucus, but I feel like 9 times out of 10, I'm not really sure what to put if
Yeah.
I'm tracking it. And like, how do you know? Like, obviously, yeah, okay, egg white, slippery, and sticky, or like thin, clear, a little bit
Mm.
milky looking. Like, how do you know what is what and what you're
Yeah.
looking
So
at?
it's those things. And I guess when you're tracking with an app, information is power. So the more months you have that you've really like focused in on your mucus and written everything down, the more information you have, the easier it's going to be to start to distinguish, oh, maybe it is on this day because I've actually recorded the same thing last month around this time. So that information is going to be really powerful. But I also like to explain ovulation mucus, cervical mucus, as it's like tangible. So women experience discharge most of the month, but ovulation discharge is the kind of discharge that you could go to the bathroom, pull down your underwear, and it's like you could almost pick it up off your underwear if you wanted to. It's kind of like,
Right.
that snotty part of the egg. So if you were to crack a raw egg, and there's always that snotty part that you could literally like pick up and like,
Ah, yeah,
that's how I
yeah.
like to explain it. It changes in that around that ovulation period. Whereas the
Mm,
rest of the time, like what I was just saying, it's that thin, sort of slippery, but it's not tangible in any way. Does that make a
mm,
little bit more sense?
mm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, with me personally, I always try and like think, okay, what is that? And I've even gone in and like touched it and tried to be like, I don't even know, like, trying
Yeah.
to decipher what kind of mucus that is. I've even gone to the stages of like taking an ovulation test just to make sure that, I
Yeah.
know that's what it is. And then it came up that I wasn't ovulating, and I was like, okay, my app is like completely wrong,
Yeah.
So
And that's the
yeah,
thing. Sometimes the apps are really wrong. You're just using it as a guide, particularly if you have a
yeah,
longer period and a regular period. So if one month your period's at 26 days and the next month 30 and the next month 28 or even longer, then
mm,
it will be inaccurate. Using those test kits can be really helpful. If you don't have strong ovulation or your hormones, there's like that imbalance. Sometimes, though, even with the changes in the cervical mucus, it won't always register on a test kit either. So the test kits can be a good guide, especially if you're trying to get pregnant or if you're trying to prevent pregnancy as well. Then using the test kits and really trying to work out when ovulation is happening is important. One of the best
yeah,
ways you can do it is also your basal body temperature. So
yeah,
that's another way that you can track your ovulation. But it doesn't really work for shift workers or mums who are getting up in the night. You have to have the same routine, the same morning. You've got to be testing the same
mm,
time each day, at least 6 hours in bed before waking, because that can all spike your temperature. But that's another way
yeah,
to track it. It's just a little bit more complicated, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. I actually tried to get like the Natural Cycles app just to like go next level with like natural tracking, and they don't ship the thermometers to Indonesia.
Really?
So when I was in the UK, I actually ordered like one of these smart rings, and it tests like takes my temperature when I sleep. So apparently it's
Amazing.
like super accurate. I don't know. We're still figuring it out. But
That's
yeah.
awesome though. Yeah, you'll have to
Yeah.
let us know if it's working. Okay.
What type of food should you be eating during your follicular phase?
Yeah, so during this phase, what we're wanting to do is a lot around that estrogen rise. Some of you may have heard about seed cycling, which I think is super cool, but essentially, seed cycling is using different seeds throughout the month to support the hormones that are happening. It's using the food is medicine approach, right? So, normally with seed cycling, you won't see any drastic changes for at least 3 months, but a lot of women find power in eating a certain way at a certain time of their period to support their hormones. So seed cycling in the follicular phase, if you were to do that, it's 1 tablespoon of pumpkin seeds and 1 tablespoon of flaxseed, ideally grounded a day. And so you can mix that in yogurt or smoothies or whatever else. If you do have an irregular period, I would normally say stop that around day 14 because that is generally on a 28-day, picture perfect cycle when ovulation is occurred. So if we're trying to bring those hormones into balance, and that's one way to do it is to stop at day 14, even if you're not sure if ovulation has occurred. The other foods that we're wanting to focus on is iron-rich foods, particularly, we've just gone through a bleed. So ideally coming from your lean red meat a couple of times a week, but otherwise you've got your spinach, wilted's best, like cooked spinach, kale, or lentils to support your blood health. And that's really important if you've had iron loss. And you may even like to look at implementing around this time, like a really nice, beef liver supplement that you can put into your cooking or something along those lines. Your omega-3 fatty acids are really important as well. So they've got really nice anti-inflammatory properties and they support that hormonal balance as well as your ovarian function. So thinking about, salmon, sardines, your flax seeds, all your nuts and seeds, those kind of foods. Whole grains really important, like your oats, quinoa, brown rice. They're going to provide those complex carbohydrates that help sustain your energy, and also fiber if you do have any digestive health problems that kind of are linked with your period, which is not uncommon for women's bowel motions to slow or fasten, diarrhea or constipation around that time.
Mm.
And then also your lean proteins, which help to improve that tissue repair and hormonal production. So again, thinking like chicken, red meat, fish, tofu, turkey, beans, lentils, those kind of foods. So they're kind of the main foods that you'd be eating in that follicular phase, or not main foods you'd be eating, but building your meals with those
Mhm.
foods in mind, and then whatever
Yeah.
else comes around it.
Yeah,
Mm,
pimping your meals, as you said last
yeah,
time. Yeah.
I did.
Awesome. And then what about the ovulation phase? Like, what really happens in ovulatory phase? It kind of is
Yeah.
self-explanatory, but yeah.
So this is obviously when a woman is most fertile, and it spans for a few days before and after ovulation. And sperm can survive in the female reproductive tract for several days, up to 5 days. So having
Mm.
intercourse during this is obviously going to increase your chance of fertilization and therefore pregnancy. If you are trying to avoid pregnancy, then knowing when you ovulate is really important, and ideally avoiding those days in the lead up is important as well, to prevent pregnancy. But as the follicular phase progresses, estrogen levels rise, leading to a surge in luteinizing hormone, so LH, from the pituitary gland. And this LH surge typically occurs about 24 to 36 hours before ovulation. But as the follicular phase progresses and those estrogen levels are rising, it leads to a surge in luteinizing hormone from the pituitary gland. That surge typically occurs about 24 to 36 hours before ovulation. So, ovulation itself is the release of a mature egg from one of the ovarian follicles into the fallopian tube, and the release is triggered by this LH surge. The egg is
Mm.
viable for fertilization for about 12 to 24 hours after that release. So, after the egg is released, the remaining follicle transforms into a structure called the corpus luteum, which secretes progesterone and some estrogen, preparing the uterus for potential implantation of a fertilized egg. So, leading up to and during ovulation, as I mentioned, the cervical mucus changes become more clear and slippery and stretchy. And this type of mucus actually aids sperm survival and movement
Mhm.
through the cervix and into the uterus, which, like, I just think it's so incredible what our body does. Like, it just blows me away. So that's kind of what ovulation is, and I guess the purpose for ovulation.
We really don't know enough. And we come out of school thinking that you can have sex anytime in your cycle and you can fall pregnant. And then lo and behold, you try and fall pregnant and you're like, why am I not falling pregnant? And then you look into this and you're like, oh, there's only like, in the movies where they're like, let's have sex. It's my ovulation phase. It's my window. It's actually real.
Mm,
Like the
for
5
sure.
or 6 or 7 days around
Yeah,
ovulation are so crucial, definitely. Yeah.
absolutely.
And the fact that our body actually makes like the vaginal environment is too acidic for the
Mm,
sperm to survive, and then during these couple of days, it actually opens up and says, "Okay, I'm giving this window VIP access." And yeah, helps them along. Yeah, definitely. So it's
it's
amazing.
wild.
Yeah.
Mm.
What foods can help support you through the ovulation phase? Like, okay, firstly, what are you feeling during the ovulation phase? Just briefly.
Yeah, so this is normally you're still on that kind of high. And I have some clients who say this often, like they know they're ovulating just purely because of their libido. And so often it's when a woman is feeling very sexy and she has a strong sex drive during ovulation. So that can be another really good kind of indication as to, oh, I need to check out my mucus because
Mhm.
of that urge suddenly that she's feeling. So yeah, that's kind of like the way she's feeling. Still pretty good at this point.
Good. Yeah, I definitely know that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, which foods can help you during ovulation phase?
So you're still wanting to fill up your plate with all those things we just mentioned, like the leafy greens, whole grains, eggs, legumes, meat,
Mm.
lots of water. Water plays a key role in transporting hormones and developing follicles. The other really important nutrient, which we get through sunlight, is vitamin D. But vitamin D receptors are found in reproductive tissue, including the ovaries. So, vitamin D plays a role in regulating the production and activity of hormones
Mm.
involved in ovulation. So, it's supporting that FSH that we talked about, the LH, luteinizing hormone. So, getting out in the sunshine, safe exposure for up to 15 minutes a day. And I know your listeners are worldwide, so it will vary, but like in Australia, the deficiency of vitamin D here in Australia is just wild. So if you
Mm.
are deficient in vitamin D, then I would say definitely look at getting a supplement if you feel like you're not getting the sun exposure every single day.
Yeah, isn't that surprising? Because, we're supposed to have, like, Australia is supposed to have the strongest sun because we have the, like, lowest ozone layer or whatever it is.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, only 5 to 10 minutes in the sun in Australia can just get you the enough vitamin D, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't actually know if that's, 100% accurate. But what you said about water is so important, because also I just wanted to touch on, if you are wondering like about your mucus and what we're saying, and oh, I'm not really seeing that in my underwear, kind of those thoughts, maybe you're not drinking enough water. Water is so important to actually getting accurate or close to accurate results on, figuring out what is going on in your cycle. And also, we are so sensitive that even just drinking not enough water can affect whether we don't get our period or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, at least 3 liters a day. Like that's if
Yeah.
a woman should be having 3 liters a day. If you're exercising, especially like really working up a sweat, or if it's
Mm.
summer and you're sweating a lot, those kind of things, and then you'd want to increase that. Otherwise, ensuring that you are having a really good electrolyte in your water. If you feel like 3 liters is like too much right now, then you want to make sure
Mm.
you're getting a good electrolyte at least.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any tips that you have for listeners to help maximize fertility and like during this phase if they're having trouble conceiving?
Yeah, so I mentioned flax seeds a couple of times. And so, flaxseed, there's been lots of research around having 30 grams of flax seeds per day, which can really improve ovulation and hormonal balance. So, essentially, it's like 2 to 3 dessert tablespoons of ground flaxseed meal. So, it has to be ground and kept in your fridge just to protect the enzymes from oxidation. But you can put that into your porridge, yogurt, smoothies. I mentioned the essential fatty acids, like around this time, I'm really looking for at least 2 to 3 times a day. You're adding these into your diet. And again, that includes your flaxseed, but also other nuts and seeds like your pumpkin seeds, sunflower
Mm,
seeds, olive oils, avocado, those kinds, and soy food as well. Like soy, I bring in a lot throughout the menstrual cycle, and I think there's this ongoing debate surrounding the consumption of soy foods, but the evidence is compelling when we include it as a part of our diet in its whole unprocessed form. Soy actually is a nutritional powerhouse with really significant benefits to our health and well-being, and it actually
mm,
positively impacts our health and helps to modulate that hormonal balance. So, soy is another food that I bring in. So, your whole soy foods that are GMO and ideally organic, but you've got your tofu, your tempeh, soybeans, edamame beans, miso, soy milk, like those kind of foods as
mhm.
well. I'm often bringing in.
Yeah, it's often a surprise when I say that to someone and they're like, "Oh, but research says that that's bad." And it's like, no, actually it's good. It gets rid of like the bad estrogen in your body. It helps almost cleanse the estrogen out and leave room for the good estrogen to come in.
If we think about soy foods as well, like there is a lot of processed soy foods on the market. So, like,
Yeah.
that's not what we're talking about. It is really
Yeah.
those whole foods and those whole food soy products for sure.
Can you explain the luteal phase for me, just and what
Yep.
what happens in your body?
So after ovulation, the follicular that release the egg transforms into a structure called the corpus luteum, which secretes progesterone and some estrogen. So progesterone prepares the uterine lining for possible implantation of a fertilized egg. During this time, estrogen continues to support the thickening of the endometrium. And
Mhm.
under the influence of progesterone, the endometrium becomes thicker, preparing to support for a potential pregnancy. If fertilization doesn't occur, the corpus luteum will eventually degenerate, leading to a decline in progesterone and estrogen levels. After ovulation, the cervical mucus becomes thicker and less hospitable to the sperm. It's to prevent the sperm from entering the uterus during a non fertile period. And obviously, if fertilization and implantation do not occur, the corpus luteum begins to degenerate about 10 to 16 days after ovulation. And this decline in progesterone and estrogen levels then trigger the shedding of the uterine lining, resulting
Mm.
in menstruation. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what's happening hormonally through that luteal phase. So essentially, it's like the follicular phase is very estrogen dominant, whereas the luteal phase, we're looking more at that progesterone picture.
And how are you feeling? Is this when you're going, "Oh god, I just feel like ugh, I feel like
Yeah.
poopy."
Yeah, the opposite. Literally the opposite.
Yeah.
Like you're feeling slower, you're feeling, you just kind of want to hibernate more. Like this is the time to really kind of turn inward. Like if you're into journaling and things like that, this is a really nice time just to be like slowing everything down, not as much socializing. If you've got any big work projects, hopefully they were done like through your
Mm,
follicular phase. Like it really is the time just to kind of slow. You might do more yoga and that slower kind of stuff as opposed to like your hit classes or going out for a run.
yeah. This is the time when you really just have to follow what your body is feeling. Sometimes you do have to push yourself, but you have to just listen to your body and
Mm,
sometimes just take a break, take a slow
yeah.
day. So we kind of already mentioned it a little bit, but what are the common PMS symptoms that women experience during this phase? Like, are they starting to feel a little bit of those mood swings and stuff like that? And is that normal or is that abnormal?
Yeah. So normally a week-ish after ovulation, like a lot of women will start to experience their PMS symptoms leading up. So often we're
Mm,
thinking like sugar cravings, lower
yeah.
moods, lower energy, slower digestion more often than the faster like diarrhea. So a little bit of constipation, cramping, bloating, just that kind of like
All the
blah feeling.
unattractive stuff
Exactly.
when you just do
And
not want to be touched.
And no, it doesn't have to be normal. I think one of the misconceptions we have as women is that we have to put up with these symptoms because our mums did and our mums, but
Yeah.
it's because of that lack of knowledge. But getting your blood test is going to give us some really good information as to what your
Mm,
hormones are doing. And from there, we can start really focusing on what's actually happening. But one thing that I like to do if you are experiencing PMS, if we're thinking about that hormonal balance, we've kind of already talked about a few things like your whole food soy, your flaxseed, but also even just focusing in on your liver. So I like to
mm,
bring in lots of bitter foods. If you can handle it, like apple cider vinegar in water, just drinking it through a straw to protect your teeth enamel, or lemon if apple cider vinegar is too strong. But bringing in those nice bitter foods that are really going to help that estrogen clearance. We're thinking about the cruciferous vegetables, which are
mm,
3 to 5 cups a week. Again, if you have more of that estrogen dominance playing out, and if that estrogen isn't taking a dip at this point, then that's as well going to contribute to a lot of those symptoms. So, yeah, they're kind of like what I'm trying to do to help alleviate the symptoms. But again, like getting
mhm.
a blood test to check in on what your hormones are doing is going to be the first point. So then we can go, like this is what's happening, and that's probably why you're getting these symptoms. But even things like the sugar cravings can sometimes be a magnesium deficiency, so can the
Mm.
cramps. So having more magnesium into your diet around that time can really help with like the cramping, but also those sugar cravings as well. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, and if it's not working, then I would definitely say like your blood tests are essential.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What you said about misconceptions, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Mm,
Like, that's one thing that we are taught in school is that you do get grumpy, and it's often thought of as like a bad thing. Like, the guys that I went to school with, if I was a bit grumpy one day, they'd be like, oh, someone's menstruating or like someone's on their period, and made it sound like really bad. And
mm,
like, honestly, we don't find out about endometriosis, PCOS until it's like later on. But yeah, we don't it's not normal to get really painful periods. It's not normal to be like really moody, lying in bed for 3 days. It's not normal.
yeah.
And if you are feeling like that, it's definitely okay to go and see someone just to get checked up. You might find that you're catching something early because endometriosis, PCOS, hormone imbalances, and like thyroid conditions are becoming more prevalent. I would love to see some studies on why that is. What are we doing
Mm.
differently? Or is it just that
Mm.
we're actually finding these things out?
I think
Um,
it's just more research coming to air now. And
yeah,
I feel like as well, from a natural sense, like naturopaths getting more of a voice thanks to social media. I
yeah,
feel like your naturopaths, nutritionists, Chinese herbalists, they have always been looking at this, but there's obviously more research, more medical resources available. I see a lot
mm,
of clients who are like, oh, my mum suffered this and my grandma suffered this and my sister suffers
yeah,
this ongoing. And now they're like, but surely I don't have to suffer this.
yeah,
And I'm like, no, you don't. So I think as well, it honestly is just a lot of that's what happens and that's what you put up with. But
mm,
our generation is starting to change that conversation.
yeah. Good. It's about
Mm.
time. I just want to quickly add that it's actually quite funny. During my luteal phase, my husband often gets a little notification on his phone just to be careful because Barry might be feeling a little bit grumpy, and just agree with her. So she's always just like, yes, honey, that's
I
fine.
love it.
It's a
Good,
marriage
you know, you
saver, yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of men, if I ever do like a double session, like I'll ask the woman what her period's like, and the man will be like, "Can I answer that one?"
So, what are some foods that you should be eating during your luteal phase to help you feel more energetic, more alive, and less bleh?
Yeah. So again, going back to the seed cycling, if that's what you like, then you're doing 1 to 2 tablespoons of your sunflower seeds and 1 to 2 tablespoons of your sesame
Mm,
seeds daily to support the progesterone levels. And again, like if you have an irregular period, then you'd be starting that from day 15 until day 1 of bleed. The complex carbs and healthy fat are really important. But as I said, that magnesium just to reduce the muscle cramps, to support relaxation, and to help sugar cravings if you do experience those.
yeah.
Magnesium can also be really good for digestive health. So, this is like your leafy greens, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, or
Mm,
supplementation. B6 can also be really helpful at alleviating PMS symptoms. So, bananas, potatoes, white potatoes,
mm,
chickpeas, and herbal teas I bring in a lot during this phase as well. So things like your chamomile, your passion flower, your peppermint, just all of those really calming teas, and bringing in rituals around that. So sitting down for 5 minutes and having a cup of tea with a bit of chocolate and reading a book, like really trying to support that nervous
mm,
system as much as possible, because we also can't ignore how stress plays into our menstrual cycle. And if you've got an irregular period, or if you are having PMS symptoms,
mm.
then stress can be a contributing factor to that. So, really just trying to bring down that nervous system at that time is going to help with all of your symptoms, as well as just your general feeling of well being.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah, try not to be so hard on yourself, ladies. Your
Mm.
body is doing some great things, and it's important to give it a break every now and then. With the chocolate, I actually love this because we're so programmed to think, oh, cravings, we shouldn't be giving that to ourselves. Like, it's bad and it'll help me, it will make me break out. And I want to touch on that in a minute. But like, something that I absolutely loved, I bought some period undies the other day and they sent me like a little square of dark chocolate and they said, like, you know, this actually has magnesium in it. It's actually good for you. So if you do want to have those sugar cravings, rather than having the milk chocolate, have a piece of dark chocolate, maybe like over 65%
It's over
for magnesium.
80 generally for your over
Okay. Yeah.
80% for your dark chocolate. But you know what? I'm just like, I'm a realist. And I actually have come to the fact that I don't like dark chocolate, even as a nutritionist. So if I'm going to eat chocolate,
Okay.
I'm going to eat the dairy, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's like moderation is key. If you're craving a bit of sugar and you're having a bit of, chocolate or a little bit of dark chocolate, and it's within moderation, it's totally fine. I think we need to weigh up. Like, I like to look at food as soul food or food like for nourishment. And if we think about our
Yeah.
soul food, like if it's bringing you that happiness and you're able to control yourself with that, that's a different story. Like, that's not something that
Mm.
necessarily needs to be cut out, even if you are dealing with the inflammation and the skin issues and stuff like that. If the sugar cravings feel unmanageable and you're thinking about it all the time and you feel like they've just got a grip on you, then yeah,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. What are some things quickly that you can do for breakouts? Is there
Yep.
anything in particular that
Zinc's
you
really
recommend?
helpful. Yeah, your essential fatty acids. So I mentioned them
Yeah.
earlier, really beneficial. They're very anti-inflammatory. So having those at the time of your period is really good. Often there's a hormonal imbalance going on if there's skin breakouts. So I'm really focusing in on the liver at that point. So having lots of
Yeah.
your cruciferous veggies, which is like your broccoli, cauliflower, kale, like 3 to 5 cups a week, getting in lots of turmeric for that anti-inflammatory as well. you know, Thinking about the gut, like bone broths, also going back to your liver, like that apple cider vinegar, those kind of things is where I kind of go with acne.
Mm. I'm totally loving beetroot at the moment. Does that fit into the detox category?
Fits into the detox category. And also, like it's from a Chinese herbalist point of view, I believe they consider beetroot as like a blood tonic. So having that
Mm.
around the time of your menstruation, really nice for your blood
Mm.
as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm so ready for a beetroot juice right now. To be
Love
honest,
it.
there's a really delicious like fruit juice that I have with beetroot and like green apple and ginger and lime and mint, I
Stunning.
think it is. Oh
Yeah,
God, I'm
nice.
craving that right now. Yep,
Yep,
definitely.
yum.
We haven't spoken about the menstrual phase yet. Let's just quickly go through the menstrual phase. But yeah, so what's the difference really between the luteal phase and the menstrual phase? The menstrual phase is just the actual bleed, correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct. And as I mentioned, that's kind of what goes for, 5 to 7 days. And it's just the shedding of your lining that occurs every month if
Mm,
if pregnancy hasn't occurred. So at this point, focusing on your iron rich foods is obviously really important. Your vitamin C rich foods, which helps with iron absorption. A lot of women are low iron when menstruating. So your vitamin C is essentially in all fruits and veggies, to be honest. So pairing them with
mm,
your iron is important. But then also your anti-inflammatory foods, which I just mentioned, like a lot of your omega-3 fatty acids, your
mm,
vegetables, like your turmeric, ginger, like those kind of things. And then lots of water just to help keep filtering out the hormones, help with
mhm,
any digestive upset, bloating, all of that kind of stuff that can also come about. And then obviously from a lifestyle perspective, you can use heat packs, gentle
mm,
massage, magnesium baths if you're experiencing lots of cramping, or even like magnesium sprays can be really useful. But I also will just point out there's also a time and a place for medication. Like if you're having severe
yeah,
cramps and you're needing to use Panadol or something like that, then I'm all for that. What I want you to know is that it doesn't have to be your normal for your rest of your life either. Like you can
yeah,
actually do something about it, but there is time and a place for the Western medicine and interventions as
mm.
well.
Yeah, definitely. Some really great tips. There was like a podcast that I listened to the other day, and they said something about raw versus cooked. When in your cycle do you eat raw, and when should you eat cooked food?
Oh, see, this is a tough one because I'm also very thyroid focused. And when we think about the thyroid, like raw foods don't fit in with the thyroid a lot. And so, yeah, I guess I I would say that normally the follicular phase is more of your raw foods. You want to support your body and you want your food to be broken down. So I'm kind of like a cooked gal most of the time, to be honest. But as I said,
Mhm.
I also deal with thyroid issues, and for thyroid health, then your cooked foods are more beneficial for the most part. So I would just, yeah, my approach would be probably just to find the balance. Like, of course, you can have salads, if that's what you want, but I wouldn't say you have to eat salads at a particular time versus another. Like,
Yeah.
listen to what your body wants. And if anything, it's probably, seasonal, and all of that's going to come into play as well. Like, there's no way I'm eating any kind of raw food right now because it's winter here in Australia. Like,
Yeah.
I am not having a smoothie, a salad, nothing more, no matter what time of the
Yeah.
cycle I'm on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's just follow your body. If you do feel like something raw, have it. If you don't, that's totally fine too. I'm totally an advocate for follow your body. Follow what you feel. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you start tuning into these kind of things, you'll be really surprised at what your body tells you. Like, it's pretty amazing. Like, your body does tell you a lot in the day. It's just often with the everyday hustle and busyness,
Mm.
we forget to tune in and actually listen.
Shelley, it's been wonderful having you back on the podcast and learning about how what we put in our bodies can support us to feel the best throughout our menstrual cycle. I feel like when it comes to periods, we're all kind of left to figure it out for ourselves. And today, you've really given us some really great info, and I will definitely be using it for my cycle. Do you want to tell the
So,
listeners where they can find you?
so I hang out on Instagram the most. It's just Shelly Mackenzie _ naturopath. Otherwise, you can just search me freedomwellness.com.au, and you'll also find my website and my online clinic and everything there.
Yeah, amazing. Oh my gosh. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you give us a follow and rate the show. And if you know someone who you think needs to hear this episode, give it a share so we can spread the word and educate more mamas and women worldwide. And we'll see you next Monday for another juicy episode. For more information on pregnancy, birth, and parenthood, head over to my website or Instagram at blissfulbirth.co. And just a little reminder, the information contained in this podcast is here to educate and empower, and does not replace the advice of your own healthcare provider.